Okay, and whoever else can drop by whenever they get a chance. But one thing I just wanted to remind you all, first of all, welcome to another satsang. But is just to remind you all that you know, if you guys are looking for more general videos or information, right? My YouTube channel has a whole bunch of videos on all kinds of things, surrender and inquiry basically, but all kinds of videos on that stuff. So you're welcome to peruse my YouTube channel, and also my website has a mailing list. Every time I post a new video, you'll get it by my mailing list if you want, or if I have any other announcements. So you guys should subscribe if you haven't already to my channel, and my mailing list on my website is siftingtothetruth.com, which you guys may or may not know, but I will put it in the chat just in case you don't. Um, yeah, but there's a lot of little there's a lot longer videos, of course, but there's also, shorter videos, which a lot of shorter videos on, sort of smaller details, questions that people have asked me about, various aspects of the practice, or various metaphors that have occurred to me about, this or that element of it. So it can be useful or motivational. But that said, why don't we begin with the 10-minute meditation? You'll do, again, of course, self-inquiry or surrender, which does anyone need instructions in those, or is everyone more or less familiar? Anyone? Okay, Kritika, you need okay. So let me give you some basic instructions. And what I'm going to do, I think, is I haven't done this yet, but I may pick a video or two out actually as yeah, or maybe generate a couple extra videos anyway, that will give basic instructions, and that way I can distribute them to people in advance. But anyhow, so I'm going to give you very abbreviated instructions, and you can go to my videos for more. But essentially, the basic idea behind inquiry is we are looking for your ordinary moment to moment sense of existing. You somehow know you exist. It seems to be that you exist as a separate entity, and inquiry is trying to hone in on where that sensation, I use that word in quotes because it's not exactly a sensation, but sensation or feeling or knowledge or that light, that information, where in your experience is it coming from? And as you search for where that basic, very elementary, very ordinary knowledge is coming from, you're going to see your attention go to various things. Like, for example, it could go to your body. And the thing to notice then, or to ask yourself whenever your attention goes to one of those things is this something of which I am aware? And if it is something of which you are aware, then it cannot be that elementary knowledge of your being, or it cannot be you, for lack of a better word. Um, because what you are is aware of that. You're looking for you, the gazer, the seer, the observer. So anything of which you are aware cannot be you. If it were you, you would not be able to be aware of it. Because in order to be aware of something, there has to be a kind of distance between thing, a boundary between you and the thing. So if that happens, which it will definitely happen, then to essentially repeat the question. You can either repeat the question directly and say again, where is my sense of awareness, or where am I, or who am I? These are all the same question, basically. Or you can ask yourself, okay, well, I feel like I'm in the body. Well, who's aware of the body, right? You can go in a sort of ladder like that. That's basic. That's basically self-inquiry. You just repeat, 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 repeat. Surrender is that's the other flip side of the coin, other great practice that Ramana Maharshi recommends. And it is, of course, just a distillation of the Vedanta tradition. And surrender is a matter of basically keeping your attention in a very deliberate fashion from focusing on anything, essentially. So you are attentively defocusing on everything. And the way I always explain it is, it is as if there's a TV on in the background. That's everything that's going on out in the world, and also everything that's going on in your own mind, all your emotions, all your thoughts. And in surrender, you simply ignore them all. It doesn't mean you have to turn the TV off. You don't have to change the thoughts. You don't have to change the feelings. You don't have to reject the thoughts. You don't have to reject the feelings. They can all just be there just as they are, but you can just choose not to allow your attention to become absorbed in them. So you keep essentially reminding yourself in some sense that these are just phenomena that are passing, to not allow your attention to become seduced or absorbed by them, to not regard them as real, and by the same token, to not exert your willpower in responding to them, but rather to keep your willpower, which is really is the same thing as your focus anyhow, relaxed, right? So you're attentively, you are using your focus and your willpower to keep your focus and your willpower otherwise relaxed. That's all that surrender is. You just keep that process continuously going, of continuously recognizing that whatever phenomena are occurring in your mental, emotional, and physical worlds, all of these are just passing light, white noise, irrelevant to you. And your job is simply to relax, like as if you were, an emperor or empress whose only job was to do nothing. That would be your only job in life. And you treat the person who you think you are as a third person, another entity, and let them deal with the responsibilities of life or not deal with it as they wish, their problem. So that's surrender in a nutshell. So with that in mind, those brief instructions given, let's do 10 minutes together. You choose one or the other or a mixture of both, no problem. And I always encourage eyes open, but it's not required. Because why? Because the point of this exercise is not to just to do it in a group setting or even individually while sitting, but to do it all the time. The point of the exercise is all the time. That's the aspiration anyway. So that's why I often encourage eyes open, because it's more repeatable in the outside. So anyway, let's try that for 10 minutes right now. All right, so I'm going to open the floor now if anyone wants to talk about either the experience they just had or experiences with the practice over the past week or whatever time, or other questions. Feel free.
Akhil, can I go?
Please go for it. Yes.
Yeah, this is not the practice just now I did, but it is in general how my journey is going with both self inquiry and surrender.
Mhm.
This is when I do self inquiry, mostly my self inquiry, I observe it goes with my routine work, like when I'm doing chores, or during my walks or whatever, like when there are silent moments. So I mostly observe that, like when I'm sitting alone or I don't have, like I take break from the work, and during walks, I'm able to focus more on this self inquiry. But when I'm absorbed in something new, kind of a job or sometimes even my routine, I involve myself so much into that. So I lose that sense of, again, track. And it is really, sometimes it is like so many hours I lose track. Again, I had to remind myself
Yeah.
about it. That is so it is like when the break comes or during walk, it's becoming easy, but otherwise it is really, hard. Sometimes get so much absorbed into it, I really forget about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's
Another,
that's very natural. Yeah. I mean, that's so go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, again, another thing is maybe it is a strong attachment when it comes to pursuing my passion, like gardening. I'm really passionate about gardening. So sometimes that dominates my day. Like if I'm started now, the weather is becoming better, so I'm so absorbed into that that sometimes the attachment takes a lot of energy from me. I'm so absorbed into that, I totally forgot, and again I had to remind myself, oh, what am I doing? So how to balance it? There are so many passions we develop from this childhood, and we are so passionate when we see that, and we want to do more inquiry about. So, for example, I find a new plant, I want to read about that. So much time goes into it. So to balance this self inquiry, is it like a, how can we cut down on this passion, whatever it is from our childhood we are pursuing, and it is a strong bond attachment, I see that way.
Yeah. So, the truth is, it's never a question of balance.
Hmm.
Okay. So the whole point of self-inquiry and surrender in the end is, you know, um, the recognition that you're not Sri Devi,
Yeah.
effectively,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So,
Yeah.
so, so, the passions that you think are yours, like gardening, are really
Hmm.
not your passions, is the truth. You misidentify, so to say, with Sri Devi, who
Hmm.
seems to exhibit those kinds of passions. And so, the reason the attachments are attachments is precisely because of the misidentification. And so, ultimately that identification needs to be attacked. And how do you attack it? Well, when you're doing inquiry, what it's pointing out to you is you don't know who you are.
Hmm.
See, this is, again, even before you do know who you are, I said this before, but the truth is, it is a huge it can be and it should be a huge revelation and shock to recognize that you truly don't know who you are. You know, it's only because we just were like, yeah, 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 I don't know who I am, but really, I'm Sri Devi, right? Like that's essentially how it
Yeah,
goes,
I
right?
think that
Now,
is the challenge I find, dissociating from that idea of I'm identifying with that Sridevi is that is the biggest challenge.
well, no, of course. I mean, that is what. So
I
that
feel I know that I know Sridevi so well. Like I try to, again,
you have to
dissociating from that
recognize
thought is the big challenge. Yeah.
you're aware, right? You're aware of her
Aware. Yeah,
activities, right?
yeah, yeah.
But look,
Mm.
the point is what you're illustrating is, identification is supported by attachments, and attachments support identification because
Yeah.
attachments essentially are based on the idea that I'm this person, right? And they
Mhm.
also distract you from practice because you become invested in those attachments. Like, oh yeah, I enjoy gardening. I want to be involved in gardening. I want to feel like I'm doing the gardening. I'm selecting the new plant. I'm learning this new cool thing. I'm seeing
Mm.
the plants grow and I made them grow or whatever it is, right? All of that investment makes you feel like I need to focus. I need to put my focus. I need to put my focus on the gardening, right? So it weakens over time when you subject those thoughts to the practice of inquiry over time, right? You start to think, well, who exactly is it that cares so much? Who's having these thoughts that I like gardening? I like gardening. Who's the I in that sentence? Who's the I in that thought, right? And then you look and then you're like, well, I don't know who I am, right? So as you see that over and over and over again, slowly, right? And A, as you see that, B, as you do inquiry and you start to encounter greater amounts of peace, slowly the attachments will weaken. Because as you say, for example, right now, it's already easier to do inquiry than it was before in certain moments where you're doing chores or you're just taking a walk, right? So that's how it is, right? It's like water that's coming in, right? The practice is like water that's coming in, into a building, and it's like it goes into the weak points first, right? Those times where you don't care about the chores or you feel like, oh yeah, it's pretty automatic, right? Where you don't feel like I need to put a lot of my attention into this, or I don't care about this thing that much, right? Or I'm just taking a walk. It doesn't really matter where my attention is, right? In those areas where areas of time where attachments are already fairly weak, it's easier to do the practice. Nevertheless, as you do the practice in those moments when you can, it will eventually become easier to do them, in the slightly more difficult moments, and then the slightly more difficult moments than that, right? But it's good that I have to say, it's good you're already recognizing how much you're not doing the practice, because that's already showing that you're attempting the practice, right? You're like, oh yeah, hours and hours went by, I didn't do it. But just to be clear, right? Our goal here is not balance. Our goal here is
Yes.
challenging the whole idea that you're involved in any of this stuff at all, right? And to recognize, right, at some level, right, this is another point of the practice. A part of the practice is it's going to make you more desirous eventually of knowing the truth, right? As the desire for liberation burns hotter and brighter, to that extent, the attachments will be less and less powerful, basically, because right now it's like, oh yeah, well, inquiry is nice, but gardening's pretty good too. you know, liberation's nice, but I also really like this TV show. Eventually, right, the desire for liberation it will be built into this huge bonfire where it's like, I don't care, right? Everything else can go, jump off a bridge. Like I need this, right? So that itself is a product of the practice, right? So these are all kind of like chicken and egg type situations, right? But what happens is as you inject the practice into, like I say, certain weak points where it's easier to do, it will seep in. But good to recognize it, and you should recognize as well, right? Again, that uh essentially these are choices that are being made, right? There's a kind of choice that's being made to focus on the gardening or your work, or like you say, new things that you're learning, as opposed to the practice, right? And to the extent that you're doing that, you should recognize, that that that's an obstacle to the goal of the practice, and as you get more, if you feel more impatient about it, recognize that this is a game that you're playing, and every time, right, the attachments are winning right now, right? I mean, not every time, but most of the time, right? So, there's someone trying to, effectively trying to fool you into shifting your attention to this other random activity. And your goal is, can you get your attention back? So yeah, so that's how.
But as far as possible, while doing this, pursuing these passions, also, if I can keep my awareness
So
flowing through, so that is okay, right?
well, look, so I would always suggest, right, you're the way you think about it ideally is you're doing the inquiry or surrender. I mean, in reality, the way anyway works is, your attention is going to flicker, which whether you like it or not, it's almost certainly going to flicker. But ideally, your attention should be, if you can, the ideal is completely focused on surrender or inquiry. And this other idea that gardening should happen, that's a thought. As soon as it arises, who's having the thought? right? So it's not that you're trying to do not that you're trying to do inquiry or surrender, quote unquote, while gardening. It's that you do inquiry or surrender, and if gardening happens, it happens, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
So,
yes.
so that's the ideal. Now, the reality is, you're going to see, if you've already seen how your mind will in fact flicker. That's and so you do the best you can under those circumstances. But you should try to view it as, ideally, as I'm trying to do it all the time. I'm trying to put my attention 100% on inquiry or surrender. And these other activities, the only reason they matter to you is because you think that you're a Sri Devi.
Yeah.
Inquiry is challenging. You see what I'm saying? The reason you care about the gardening is because I'm enjoying this activity. You see that? But who is I?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the point, right? The moment you see, I don't know who I am, then immediately it calls into question why it is that I care about this, right? Everything that's cared about is cared about because we assume that I'm related to that thing, right? Like my family, my health, my career, my hobbies, right? My whatever it is, right? Me. But who is me?
Yeah.
Right? As soon as you see you don't know that, then suddenly all those things are like, well, why do I care about it actually? So anyway, that will come with more time, but like basically that's the idea. Okay, sorry, Geeta, you got a question? Yeah, Geeta, huh? Oh yeah, there we go.
Okay. See, I now this week and now not like two things. One, I wanted to check. Is it okay with like carrying over your experience searching to the next search round of search? Right. For example, I know I align with the silence, and I know where it goes beyond my ears, like hearing and then emotion and everything. Then those kind of things are kind of like not through anybody saying or in the book, but what I experienced. So is it okay to get forward with that and then get started every time you start to do a new inquiry? So like we don't want to carry our any concept idea and any of those things, right? But our own experience,
Your own experience. So look, so when you have your own experience, as soon as it's happened, it becomes a memory.
Yeah.
Right? So it then becomes like a thought. Right? What we're looking for is what's aware of the thoughts. So, I would suggest, the idea that you're going to bring it in, right? What you're really doing is you're bringing in, because in that moment when you encountered the silence, it may have been a glimpse or something like that, perhaps. But as soon as you're thinking about it, now it's become this fossilized thing, and that you're then bringing in as this sort of like a preconception, But what you're looking for is what's the light that's aware of that, So I would suggest, rather than bringing in what you think you experienced the last time you did inquiry, to rather go back to that basic hunt, because it's a hunt, okay? And what will happen is, what you already have seen, I think, is as you do more and more inquiry, you will, as you hunt the basic sensation, right? The fundamental basic sense of I-ness, I'm here-ness, I'm awareness, right? As you're looking for that, you will automatically much more quickly go to those deeper levels. You will learn to skip those initial levels, but you shouldn't do it, in my opinion, by trying to go to your memory of one of those deeper levels, but rather to look for the basic thing again, and then you will automatically go to those levels.
That's true.
Rather than, yeah, that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then one other thing that I noticed is like I see that I experience that it's above my hearing, it's above my deeper feeling, it's above my everything. And then I said, since I feel that it's all along I was kind of thinking distant, but now I feel it's also part of every little things then inside, and also it stands out. And the silence also, silence you feel alone, and everything else is distracted. Everything else is completely wear off, weakened, and so you go inside, and then you really like getting to the like more in the hunt feeling, not hunt feeling, the standing of inside of the like silence, alignment of, or we call it alignment of with the silence, that kind of a feeling. And then I feel that I am also part of that feeling standing out kind of a stage. Standing out stage. And also since I am, it's no more my alignment with like with anything, but it's more like my hunting, serious hunting of that standing out feeling.
That's great. No, that's good. So just keep hunting, right? So just recognize, right? You see the mind, what the mind is doing, right? It's trying to, the mind is touching on it, but the mind, it's like the mind again is like a two-dimensional, it can only deal with two-dimensional representations. And now it's trying to transpose something that is effectively 3D into a 2D space. So, so it's like, well, what is it? It's outside me, it's inside me, I'm standing apart from it, I'm with the silence is with me. Like, it's like all these different like mental representations.
Yeah.
Right. And so you just have to recognize that the series of mental representations of that, they're all just thoughts. So all of them without exception. So to keep recognizing, like you say, the riddle is still going, right? I'm still hunting. And so that's great, yes. But just to recognize again and again, right? Even in these deep, intimate, powerful, subtle experiences, it is exactly like you're looking again, exactly at a projector, okay? And the projector is projecting, these increasingly subtle slides. It's almost like, again, like, it's like you're looking at a movie screen and, you're like, you're asking yourself, where am I, or something like that, right? It's as if on the movie screen, it's showing you like a picture of you sitting in the seats or something like that, It's like a picture of you sitting in the seats, but it's still a picture of you. You see that? Like, so to recognize, or it's something like, it might even be like a picture of the screen itself or something like that. There are these representations of the situation that you have to recognize, but this is still being projected by the mind. This is still anything which comes and goes, anything which wasn't there 3 seconds ago and will stop being there 5 seconds from now, is a thought. So, yeah, it sounds like everything is going in exactly the right path, but and you're hunting. Just keep hunting. Just keep recognize that these aren't giving you anything more than the mind's attempts to grasp that, basically.
Yeah, like I get the intense feeling of hunting.
Yeah,
finally.
Good. Great. Perfect.
That means that gives emotion, that intensity. So finally, like the alignment of like peace to that kind of feeling, to intense feeling of hunting feeling, and also feel that you are standing up, feeling
right now. Sorry,
kind of you're part of the feeling, kind of a feeling, and also standing out kind of a feeling.
Right, you're part of the feeling, and you're simultaneously outside the feeling somehow.
And all along, I was thinking, oh, that beyond word, it goes beyond my years, beyond. That is a killer, I thought. So it's not like, it's not outside, beyond also. It is also part of my breathing, part of this, and part of my intense feeling,
Yes.
part of my feeling of silence and alignment, everything. So now I feel I am separated from that feeling, kind of a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So that was exactly right. Because it's a riddle again, right? It's both part of it but also beyond it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly. So you're there, but you're also not there, right? You're with it and you're also inside it. Now, this is why the Upanishads say things
yeah,
like, right, it's a small atom, it's in the center of your being, but it's also big as the universe simultaneously. So how is that
yes,
possible, right? Because,
yes,
because it has this very peculiar quality to it. That's why. So,
yes.
so as long as, yeah. So if you're seeing the riddle, which it sounds like you are, you're feeling the riddle, because otherwise, why would you be hunting? That's great.
So just to add to that, so what I have is that the I am feeling. So sometimes it is outside, sometimes it's inside, as you were saying. You feel that I am inside, the I am feeling is coming from inside. Oh, it disappeared, the body disappears, and I went away. Where did I go? I is outside then.
Uh-huh,
And then that feeling comes. Then it becomes more like a Sachi Bhava. Oh, I am neither here nor there, I am observing it.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Searching and hunting and observing. That's what I feel
Yeah,
many
yeah, that's
times.
great. That's great. Right. And then who is the one
Where's
who's
the,
observing the observing?
yeah. So instead of, so then I question, is it better to go instead of how is it happening or why? All these why, how, where, all these multiple questions come up. Which is a better question?
It doesn't really matter. You can go with whichever one you like, because the point ultimately is, I mean, and it sounds like anyway you're on the right track, but the point of the questions is not the question itself. The point is the uh experiential uh like search, basically, right? That there is, right, when you recognize, okay, Sakshi Bhava, the witness feeling, right? Again, that sense of I'm a witness is itself being witnessed. Otherwise, how would you know it? Right? So you must be you, the you who knows yourself as the witness is somehow known. Where is that knowing, the knowing of the knower? And it doesn't really matter how you phrase it. The issue is that there is the light that's pouring in to your awareness, or that is you in some sense, and that you are directly aware of this. That is to say, this light is in your experience directly. The point is to attend to it, right? To turn your attention, attempting. I know it's, how do you find it, obviously, but it's there, right? It's there somehow. It's somehow there, and you are somehow aware of yourself, and so to feel your way towards it. So we can put it in 100 different ways. None of them are exactly right. Why is it, how is it, who is it, where is it? But the point is that it's the experiential, the recognition that somehow I know that I am. Somehow I know that I am, and I know that I'm aware of, let's say, being a witness. And that knowing, the knowing of myself as apart from whatever these experiences are, even if they're highly subtle experiences of, for example, being the witness, um, that knowing, I know somehow, and where is trying to discern in your experience what exactly that consists of. So all the questions are kind of like going to have problems, but do you see what I'm saying? The point
Right.
is, you somehow know it, and to turn it's like that light it's like a light that's coming from somewhere, somehow, and it's rooted in your moment to moment experience. And so can you isolate that, discern that, attend to that, hunt that, find that? That's the point.
Right. Looks like I'm making progress, but I'm not making progress. It goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Got to grab it, went away. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. That's how it is. That's how it is. Exactly. You'll see momentary flashes and glimpses. So that's exactly how it goes. And then then the glimpses themselves become objects of experience. And again, who is aware of them? Because again, it's like, it is like, again, like a 2D sheet of paper, which you're looking at the 2D sheet of paper, and you're like, where am I? But again, like the mind is only able to absorb the 2D sheet of paper. So it's like searching, where on this 2D sheet of paper am I? Like that's why it comes to these contradictions, right? Like it's like I seem to be at every point, but at no point at all. I seem to be at all points, but it's at every point, right? That's because you're not actually on the paper, right? You're again hovering above the paper, looking down at the paper, but because the mind is that instrument which can only comprehend the paper. So the mind is looking, and when it looks, it's only looking on the paper. All it can do is keep going around in circles on the paper, But then these momentary flashes of like, oh, but there's some other way, which is non-mental, quote unquote, non-mental, which is that I'm actually not on the paper at all. That's why. It's because it's trying to represent that third dimension on a 2D space. It comes to these weird things. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're exactly in the right direction. But this is what it's struggling. It's like how, where, because it's not here, it's here, it's not here, it's here, it's inside, it's outside, it's everywhere, it's nowhere, yeah, because it's trying to find it on the piece of paper.
Right.
Yeah. yeah, exactly. That's what it is. So you just keep hunting. This is the path, exactly.
Okay.
Can I ask
Uh-huh.
a question?
Sure.
So my thing has been, the practice has been, it kind of has its, usual ups and downs, similar to what Sri Devi was alluding to. So the intensity, right? So I'm noticing, so when the intensity is very strong, right? I mean, isn't that also an attachment? So that is one question.
Yeah.
Then two is, I mean, maybe, like, so today I just decided that, okay, I'm going to type, I mean, well, I mean, it was happening by itself, that the intensity was going to be toned down and I was just going to focus on being aware, on my awareness. And I find, that's been, so I completely toned down, oh, who am I, this intense, asking questions because I got tired of it. And then, so I said, okay, I'm just going to be, focus on the awareness. And that's what I've been doing. And I find this sense of, I don't know, very stable, the equanimity. So, and I just heard you say, who's the knower that knows that you're aware, right? So that's yet another dimension, but just abiding in awareness, and watching the scenery, I don't know, seems to be like less turbulent, so.
Okay. So you have two questions. The first question is, isn't the intense practice itself an attachment? And the answer is it is. But the basic idea of the practice is you can't go to zero thought directly. You go to one thought. So we want one attachment. We want that attachment to be to spiritual liberation, and we want that attachment to consume all the other attachments, basically. So that's basically the principle of the practice. And so we want you to focus on the practice and the attachment to liberation as the thing that will lead you to first to relative peace. That relative peace will make you addicted essentially to the practice, and that addiction is a good addiction, sattvic addiction, and will weaken all the other attachments. And then eventually, as Maharishi says, it will be like the fire that used to light the funeral pyre, and then it will burn itself up. So that attachment will itself burn itself up in the end. So that's first question. Second question is what you're describing. So you said abiding in awareness or being aware of the awareness, abiding in awareness. I don't love that terminology. I'll tell you why. So anything which you're abiding in can't really be the awareness by the same principle of inquiry. Anything which you think you're abiding in can't be the awareness, because the awareness is aware of everything. Things you're abiding in, anything you think you're abiding in is a thought. Therefore, it's an object. Therefore, it's not the awareness. It's a subtle feeling which may feel like awareness, feel spacious or something like that, but it's not awareness, it's a thought. Just be aware of that. What you're describing sounds more in the realm of surrender. Remember, there's the other path, which is surrender, which is complete in itself. You don't need inquiry. You can go with surrender. And surrender is being aware without allowing your mind to be drawn into any particular thought, right? Withdrawing your mind from thought, not allowing it to rest in any particular thought, and not allowing it to take any particular thought seriously, and not allowing your willpower to be activated. So remember, this is an alternative. I would not call it abiding in awareness, however. I would call it surrender. I would call it continuously detaching yourself from various thoughts. Yeah. So that's certainly an alternative. And you can mix and match, right? You can do inquiry until you're bored of it, and then you can do surrender, or you can just do surrender if you like. So yeah, that is a powerful technique. Answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
Jay, were you raising your hand deliberately, or I can't tell if it's like a Zoom, like I know people accidentally raise their hand and Zoom will register that, but I don't know if you had a question or not.
Yes, I did. I did have a question. So I'm sort of, this is less about the practice, but I'm trying to create a mental model, and I just want to see if that is in the right track to help with the practice. So the way the mental model I'm developing is that it's let's say, you have a video game or a VR game, and there is a game character, and then there's a game player. And the game player misidentifies with the game character. Is one way of thinking about this, and actually it's actually an automated game, and the game player is just an observer, right? So let's say that's the model. And so the question is, who is doing the inquiry, the game character?
Yeah, I mean,
game player.
Yes, it's the game character.
Game character.
That's right.
So the one who's sort of getting detached, or all the practices that you want to detach, etc., is all being done by the game character.
That's correct.
And at some point, because of whatever the game character does, at some point the misidentification of the game player to the game character gets resolved. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. That's right. Exactly. I mean, it's all with an asterisk attached to it, because when the misidentification is quote unquote resolved, it will resolve in the knowledge that the misidentification never existed. So it's not like there is a real misidentification going on. There is something which the mind can't fully grasp. We want to put it in this sort of like, we can't help but put it in these ways where it sounds like there really is a misidentification. There really is an ignorance. But in fact, there is not really an ignorance or misidentification. Rather, it's much more like, the misidentification. It's like the one who misidentifies is itself is also in the game. The misidentification is a thought, actually. And the one who misidentifies is also a thought, not real. And so, the whole situation is being observed. So it's not like the game player actually misidentifies. Actually, the one who misidentifies is also in the game. So, it's difficult to put your mind around this point, because mind can't really because the whole point being there's a certain kind of like, you can view it as in some ways like recursive or fractal or something like that, if you want, if that makes it easier. But yeah, sure. That's a rough mental model, one possibility.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
So one thing I guess it's surrender. I've been thinking about this past week of, I've been trying to keep in mind that, anything I am aware of cannot be me, right? If it is in the field of awareness, it can't be me. And so there are certain things that feel quote unquote farther away from who I am, and things that feel closer than who I am. But regardless of how far away it feels, it is still something that falls within the field of awareness. And we talked about kind of working back the pole last week. So like, as I kind of work back the pole closer and closer and closer to what it feels like I am, like those identifications fall away and things get subtler. But it almost, you referenced this earlier, it does feel game-like, where it's like the closer you get to the lack of label and the lack of identification, there's like this self-preservation mechanism of the I that kicks in, and it functions, at least it seems to me, it functions in narrative and story, right? Where like you have an experience and then conceptualize or philosophize, and you can catch this little thing happen. It's like this is a game that's being played. You got me, and then you can kind of work back again, and then next thing you know, it's been
Yeah.
5 minutes. Like, they got me again, and you try to like keep coming back.
Uh-huh.
And then the analogy that occurred to me is like the cheesy sitcoms I would watch when I was a kid, when like the kids get a dog when dad is at work, and dad comes home and they're trying to hide the dog, so they put the dog in the kitchen, and dad walks in the door and he's like, I'm gonna go get a beer. I'm like, no, 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 dad, we'll get it for you, don't worry. And they go and they get the beer, and the dad sits down and kicks his feet up, and then he hears a noise in the kitchen. He's like, oh, I should go check that noise out. I'm like, no, 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 we'll get it, you know. And it's
Uh-huh.
this constant, like running in circles, leading dad in the wrong direction to
Yes,
keep
yeah,
from
yeah,
finding the
yeah.
dog, you know.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And it feels like that's what the eye is doing. It's like playing this game.
This game.
It's self-preservation.
Yeah.
Where it's constantly trying to prevent you from seeing the dog in the house.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
just carting you around like, oh, this is a really interesting philosophical concept you've never thought of. You've never thought to put it this way before. And as those things get more subtle, it just plays your greatest hits of whatever things are appealing to you to keep you from going in the kitchen and finding the dog.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a question there, but yeah, just that feeling of constantly like working back, getting caught, working back, getting caught, working back, getting caught.
Yes.
And then obviously once you get back, still continue to inquire, like, or so I guess surrender that final thing, whatever that is. And I to me, it feels like that has to be grace, because
Yeah,
exactly. It
exactly.
seems like something I can do it all.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
there is
Final
that
thing's always
thing
grace. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Final thing's always grace. I mean, the truth is, right, it's really grace from the very beginning to the end. But yes, especially that any kind of final realization is 100% grace. But yes, exactly. All you can do is chase the dog, chase the dog, chase the dog, so to say. That's all you can do, and try your very best. And that very process will itself change the attachments. But yeah, exactly. Self-preservation of the ego. Well, because the ego, basically, again, being under the misconception that, it's the mind, right? And the mind works by boundaries, right? So in order for me to exist, says the mind, I must be in a world where I'm a bounded object, essentially, and other things are bounded as well, right? And what inquiry or surrender is leading one towards is something which is boundaryless. And so in boundarylessness, the what feels like you thinks it will then cease to be, because it can't comprehend it. It's like it's incomprehensible, right?
Yeah.
It's incomprehensible. It's like that's just death, basically.
Right.
So yeah. But as you do it again and again and again and again, the mind will touch peace repeatedly, and as it touches peace repeatedly, it slowly gains trust, and eventually trust increases, desire for liberation increases, other attachments decrease, and all that whole cycle then eventually results in it allowing itself to increasingly fall into that black hole, which feels like annihilation, but is actually liberation.
And also, it seems like trying to like let go of or detach, whatever word we're going to use, from the agitation that arises when you realize you've been caught in the game again. And to me, like treating it like a game is helpful in that way, because instead of being like, dang it, man, I did it again. It's been 5 days, and then all of a sudden, like, you realize you've been caught again.
Yep.
We're just going like, all right, you got me. I'm gonna go back, and making it playful in that way, because it's play. I mean, it's a game.
Play. It is play.
And it makes, when that agitation arises where you're frustrated with yourself, and then, man, now you're in a whole nother realm of narrative and story that you're going to get dragged down in,
Yep.
So allowing that to kind of slough off and go, okay, got me. Let me sit down again. Let me work back on the pole. And then inevitably, I know I will lose myself again. And I will just do this over and over and over until that grace arrives. And until, was it Ramana Maharshi talks about like the tiger attacking you in the field. You can just sit and wait for the tiger, and then the tiger will come get you. So all I can do is continue to just quiet myself and sit and wait, and hope one day that tiger will come eat me.
Yes,
and,
yes.
It'll
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, exactly. I guess one thing I would just quickly say, though, is, it's interesting you said, it seems to come, ego seems to come in the form of narrative, which it can, for sure. A narrative is a huge element of the mind. But I will just note, right, there are other things to which we can become attached that are not necessarily in narrative form. So, I mean, again, classically, anything including meditation, which brings peace, right? We can become absorbed in various forms of peace. Which is not narrative, but it's still a thought, right? So as soon as you drop your vigilance, as soon as you drop the attention, either surrender, which is ignoring the thought, right, the continuous ignoring of it, or inquiry, which is continuously inquiring into it, ends up being the same thing. You know, then you become entranced by a thought, and not every thought is in a verbal form. So there are thoughts which are nonverbal. You look at a beautiful painting, you become entranced. That's also an attachment. So just to note that.
Yeah, I think I heard a metaphor one time about, like, you know, if we have a stream running from like down to realization of the self, and all along that stream are like whirlpools that you can get sucked into and like caught in. And some of them might be like, you know, external desires, and some of them might be like these peace states or this bliss that we feel, but it's still a whirlpool. It's not emerging yet.
That's
you know?
right.
It's still just a whirlpool. But it is it gets more and more tempting, and yeah, harder to convince yourself, I guess, or to let go of those things because it is so compelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Anybody else at the moment? And if not, we'll just do, okay, Raj, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you, Akilesh, if, you know, to have, is it okay if you can create conditions where it's easier to practice not having a will? So for example, take a 2-year break, move off to an ashram where you're not dealing with logistics, perhaps, or a similar environment where they're not particularly dealing with logistics or with the world, and just focus on this practice. And then somehow through that whole process, make a lot of progress, and then inject yourself back into the real world. Would that help and accelerate this whole process, rather than trying to do this in places where it's very challenging to practice having no will?
Well, okay. I mean, you know, I think it might, the truth is, you know, it could be helpful for some people, okay, but the problem is if you come in with the idea that you're going back, okay, you know, it's exactly like how do I put this? The point of the practice is to deal with the attachments. It's not to create an artificial temporary refuge from the attachments. I mean, not to say it can never be good. It can be good sometimes as a, you know, in the beginning, let's say, for example, right? But the point is to deal with the attachments. So it's if you're not dealing with the attachments, you know, what are you doing? You're in like a, you know, kiddie pool, basically. So how well is a kiddie pool going to help you deal with the ocean? A little bit, but not that much, you know. I mean, I've heard some different opinions about this to some extent, right? For example, right, Ramakrishna says, oh yeah, you know, at the very beginning, the spiritual quality is very fragile. You should be put in these protected environments. You know, so that's one approach. It's not entirely bad to do that, right? And that's why people visit temples. That's why people visit the Ganges. That's why people visit, you know, satsangs. But in the end, the thing is, if you have in the back of your mind that I'm going right back into the world and I do care about these things, right? These 2 years are really not, they're just like a temporary vacation, and then I'm going to go right back. You know, it seems to me that the amount of progress you can make in that situation is quite limited. You know, that when you go back into the world, that's when, again, things are going to, you know, this idea of making lots of progress. What is the progress that you're making? The progress means the weakening of the attachments. If you're not dealing with those attachments, you don't have the opportunity to make that progress. You know, the progress of just being able to sit for long periods of time in an artificial situation is not that relevant. Not that relevant. You know, it's a very artificial skill. You know, whereas the key point is actually, you know, dealing with the attachments. But anyhow, also, go ahead, sorry.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to say, anyhow, I mean, you know, of course, you could argue, and this is also true, right? Especially if it's 2 years or if it's 20 years, right? If the longer the period of time is, the more it becomes realer, right? So if you're like, okay, I'll take 30 years off and then I'll come back to the world. Okay, maybe that's different. But you know,
I was hoping,
again, you know,
I was hoping that the one who says 2 years or 30 years wouldn't be there after that.
Oh, right.
So the one who's going in there is not going to be around. So let what happens happens. Effective technique, you know. So
if the time period is long enough, then it becomes more, it approximates that more, you know. So obviously 2 years, 2 weeks is different, and 20 years and 2 years are different, I think. But yeah, there's no easy shortcut like that. And by the way, anyhow, also Maharishi says, and I agree with this, that we also have this this idea that you go to an ashram and your mind isn't coming with you, right? But the reality is you might find it actually considerably more difficult than you might think, in which case, your attachments are coming with you in many ways. That's also true. So to that extent, it is helpful because it's helpful to the extent that it's not going to be as easy as you think, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go to this ashram, it's going to be much easier. Well, if it's super easy, then it's really not helping you. If actually you brought your attachments in some sense with you and you're being forced to deal with them and it's just as agonizing in its own way, then it could be helpful. One way or the other, you have to deal with whatever the stuff that you care about. If you don't have the chance to have that arise, then you don't have the chance to feed that into the practice and challenge it, because the only reason you care about it is because you think it's you. If it doesn't arise, how can you have that opportunity?
People used to ask Ramana Maharshi that should they take sannyas? All these worldly things are bothering me so much. Bhagavan will never give them permission for sannyasam. He says, yep, you're supposed to do sannyas, you'd already done that, you would ask me.
Exactly. I agree with that. Yeah. Jay, did you have a question?
Oh no, I was just going to comment that it does help to start at the kiddie pool end of the pool and then graduate to the deep end. So it's a starting position, not your final destination.
Yeah. So that's the argument, right? That's the argument for at least, and that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, but it's not going to be a huge shortcut. It's just going to be a brief period of training. That's all,
Yeah, I would just say a quick note on that. That was kind of my experience is when I started doing all this stuff. I lived by myself. I didn't really interact with a whole lot of people. I had to work to pay for my house and that kind of thing. But all my free time was by myself. And I think I really kind of lulled myself into a false sense of security in terms of where I was. Because then I entered into a romantic relationship and then I started working with foster kids and all this extra stuff getting thrown at me. And boy, oh boy, did I realize like how many attachments I had that I didn't know I had when I got in the world and had things being thrown at me, which I probably needed that time. But it did also fool me into thinking that I was farther along than I was once I started actually having to participate in the world in a meaningful way,
Yeah, well said. Exactly. So with that, let's do another 10 minutes of practice together, shall we? So here we go. All right. Floor's open again. Anyone want to share their experience or have any questions? Huh? Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
I feel that the feeling of the feeling, kind of a feeling. It's another feeling and a superimposed feeling. So I see that it's also kind of another. It's with every single feeling, and also it connecting me to make me feel kind of a feeling.
Yes,
Right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and in other sense, I can see that it's also another kind of another sense organ kind of a feeling.
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, that's that's exactly, this is what is the mind's way of trying to put it. But yes.
And so, like, I like now next thing is everything I do, everything I see, then I see like I am connected, or I am illuminated, or I get a sense of the other sense, right? So I feel now I don't do the other sense, one more sense. But what do I do next?
Well, so, again, right, as soon as you have the idea of another sense, right, that very idea of another sense is something which is itself being observed by that sense, right?
Yeah.
So, right, as soon as you see this is a sense, whatever it is you see is not that sense.
Yeah.
Right? So as soon as you sense the sense that you have of the sense is no longer the sense. Right?
Yeah.
So just to note that and keep looking, right? So, do you see what I'm saying? So everything you're saying is correct as far as it goes. At the same time, simultaneously, to recognize everything you say is also incomplete, because whatever it is that you're saying is itself an object that you're aware of. So so just to recognize it's not quite there's still, right, because like this, oh yeah, I'm sensing this other sense. Yes, I mean that's a glimpsey kind of thought to have. But whatever you're sensing isn't it simultaneously, because you're sensing something of which you are aware. So again, to look for what's aware of that. Anything which you see what I'm saying? Any time you're putting your experience, anytime you've identified some aspect of your experience, whether it's in words or not, whatever that aspect is, has immediately become an object, however subtle it is, right? So that it's hard to hold this paradox in mind, that on the one hand, your mind is coming to clearer and clearer representations of the truth, but at the same time, to also recognize that they remain representations, and therefore not the truth. So it's like you're seeing something, but as soon as you see it, now it's being like projected onto the mind. So it's the mind's representation of it.
Yes. Okay.
And it is a better and better representation than it used to be, much better. But it's still a representation. It may be a very good representation, but it's still it's a photograph. It's not the real thing. It remains a photograph, not the real thing. It can be a very clear photograph. It's still a photograph, not the real thing, right? So you have to keep pushing by recognizing, okay, what's aware of this, right? Just to keep, because it's like you're it's like you're it's like you're it's like you're trying to point like a laser pointer, into a little hole, but as it's like a, if there's a game, it must be a game like this, where it's like, as you get closer to that hole, it's circling around it, it's like very close to that hole, but it keeps jittering. It's as you come closer and closer, it becomes harder and harder to control that pointer, it jitters. And what you get are very close, or it may strike the hole for a quick second and then deflect. You can think of it in these different ways. Whatever it is, just to recognize it's still in the realm of the mind. That's all. That's all. That's all simple point I'm making. That's all.
Yeah, but it's not from any concept. It's not from anything, and it's all
It's a subtle
my
concept. It's a subtle
experience.
concept. It still remains a concept. That's my point. So it's a subtle concept because, again, as soon as anything occurs to you, it's a concept. As soon as anything strikes you in any way, it's a concept. That's why realization itself ultimately is itself the supreme concept, you might say. But we won't worry about that right now. The point I'm saying is these are all, these sensations, these feelings you're having are, absolutely correct path, but just to keep going, just to keep relentlessly pushing, right? That's all you have to keep doing. Just keep do you see what I'm saying? Whatever you're
Yeah.
recognizing,
Yeah,
it's still some kind of experience. Like I have this experience of the sixth sense. It's still an experience. It may be a very, very refined experience, but it's still an experience.
like I feel that every single act, every single thought, every single thing, this is also there.
Yeah, right. And so again, just note, right, that very sense is an experience.
Yes.
Right? Because you didn't have it 10 minutes ago, now you have it, right? Let's just say, right? So that marks it out as an experience. It's the experience of, let's say, unity with everything, for example, right? Do you see what I'm saying? That experience, it's an experience of the sense of unity. That means it's an experience. So you have to note this too is something which is in the mind. Where am I?
So if that it happens moment to moment, if that will be classified as the right sense.
Anything which wasn't the case ever, right? So if at any point in time it wasn't so,
Yeah.
then it's an experience. Because it's come, right? So anything which comes, which has a beginning, is an experience.
But if I always experience, that means
Well, nothing is nothing is always experienced. For one thing, as soon as you fall asleep, it's gone, right? So anything which has a beginning will have an end, is the truth. So your task must be to find that which is aware of that. Just right. Do you see what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
if you're experiencing it, it's still an object. Even if you were experiencing it
Yeah.
hypothetically forevermore, okay, still it would be something which is still an object of experience.
Yeah.
It's still an
I
object
know.
of experience. So where am I? Again, right? I mean, if you used metaphor before, but again, in inquiry or surrender, it is as if you were asking, who am I? And what you're talking about, these glimpsy sort of thoughts and experiences are as if someone is showing you a clear, polished mirror. Okay. In answer, you say, who am I? Someone says, they don't say a word, they just show you the mirror. Okay. There's a further recognition, which is, I'm not the image in the mirror. You see what I'm saying? The image of the mirror may be very beautiful. It may be blissful. It may be unified and maybe feeling of union with everything. But I'm not that image. The image is a reflection of me. I don't need the mirror to be that. The mirror is an experience, a clear experience of that. But it's not me. It's a reflection of me. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I get the feeling I do not reflect. I am reflecting kind of a feeling.
Yeah, right. And again, that very feeling is itself. It's a self-reflection. Because again, it wasn't there. If it wasn't there, now it's a reflection. You see? So again and again, the mind is going to try to be as clever as possible, right? And think of all the possible contingencies and work them like a lawyer into its contract and say, oh yeah, I get it. Because I've accounted for everything, but it can't account for everything. Whatever it accounts for is still on paper. So just to recognize that whatever it is, whatever you experience, however blissful, however close to the truth it may be, it's still a mental construct. So so just to keep looking. Until when? Until you'll know when.
So there are no mile markers. It's all.
Oh no,
all
there
of-
are, well, there are mile markers. The mile markers are your ability to have continuity of the practice, right? You know, yeah, basically continuity of practice. Maharishi says freedom from unwanted thoughts, which comes to the same thing, really. You know, how strong the attachments are, how strong your desire for liberation is. You know, and yes, certain glimpsy thoughts are also progress markers, absolutely. So yeah, they are progress markers, but they're not just don't get stranded there. That's all.
So the whole concept of Chitta Prajna and all that in this, you know, in the inquiry surrender practice. So that's again just a mile marker.
Well, Chitta Prajna is arguably a realized person. So you know, because if you look at the definitions that are given in the Gita, the Chitta Prajna, right? You know, the person of steady wisdom, right? They're all internal, actually. You can't tell from the outside, right? The one who's you know, who has this equanimity, but you know, in all conditions. It's actually it's not the mind that is equanimous. It's the self which is equanimous, actually. The self is unaffected. It's the self which is always unaffected, right? The mind may be affected in various ways, but the self remains unaffected. So, you know, Arjuna asks Krishna, right? You know, how does a person of steady wisdom walk and talk and sit and right? And Krishna, of course, ironically responds in ways you can't really tell from the outside. Actually, he says, "Oh, you know, the enlightened one regards everything as the same," but you really can't tell that information from the outside. It's an inner condition. So, yeah.
So that's a good distinction. I have to reflect on that. You know, the fact that it is not, you know, unperturbed self versus unperturbed mind.
Exactly, because the viewer is in fact always unperturbed. What they view may change. Yeah.
So actually, I had a question in the game player thing. Who's unperturbed, the game character or the game player, or
The game player in your analogy would be unperturbed. Yeah.
not the game character?
The game character is by definition a series of changes. So the game character cannot, you know, the game character can be temporarily unperturbed, but you know, the game character is, if the analogy to the mind is nothing but a series of perturbations. That is what the mind is. But the player is perpetually, you know, in reality, right? If I was going to extend your metaphor, I would say, oh, actually the player is themselves a character in a second game. And that second game has its own player, you know, and that player is a character in the third game.
You're right. I mean, this is the
That would be-
tortoise is all the way down.
that's right. That would be closer to what's actually going on, because we don't really want to say that there's a player that's separate from the character in the way that the analogy paints. So, but anyway, it's close enough. So it doesn't really matter too much. You know, and all metaphors are problematic anyhow. No metaphor is perfect. So, and with that, we got to call it a day. But thank you all for coming, and I will see you again next week.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Akilesh. Bye.